Are you a bona fide whitetail genius? Can you predict the future? Well, us here at Eastern Wild, we can't either. That's why we recommend HuntWise. And today, you can enjoy a 20% discount on your purchase over at the App Store by using code EWILD. That's EWILD. So go right now and head over to the App Store and download HuntWise.
This episode is brought to you in part by HuntWise, Whitetail Mash, and Hitless Seed.
Welcome to the Eastern Wild Podcast, elevating the experience. And now, your host, Brandon and Ricky. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 2 of the Eastern Wild Hunt Podcast. Hope everyone is feeling terrific today. We're coming at you with a bit of a cool story, some early season success for me, Brandon, almost.
Some heartbreakage.
Yeah. I think it's something that at some point in time, if you bow hunt, everybody is probably going to experience. And we will get into that in detail momentarily. Just as a quick recap and overview, today's episode will be about my early October unfortunate loss on a good 8-pointer. We're going to take you through that story, how it all unfolded, how it all went down. And then we're also going to get into a little bit of the nuts and bolts of how deer hunting tends to go this time of year. What to look for, what not to look for, what you should be doing more than likely, what you shouldn't be doing, and just kind of our forward look into the rut coming up. It's a really good time of year to get excited and get to put the rifle in your hands. So it's going to be fun. So I will start off by saying this hunt took place on October the 12th, for all you guys who like to take record out there of hunts and deer movement. This was a very first sit for me in a property that I've hunted many, many times. It's actually close to where I live. And as a kind of a previous backstory, I had a history with a deer last year that I shot the last day of gun season and did not recover. I shot him. I had to pull off a really quick shot because of a feeder going off and the deer almost running off, and I had to pull off a quick shot with no rest at about 140 yards, and I actually shot him in the base of the neck below his windpipe, and it didn't kill him. And fast forward, to make a long story short, I had pictures of him through February, so he did live. He's perfectly fine. He made it through, and some neighbors had sent me a picture of him this season, and he is a giant, probably 24 inches wide and in the neighborhood of 160 inches, just based on what I've seen. But anyway, it's that deer, which is why I started focusing on this property up behind me where I live, and I've got a place up there that I can go where this deer kind of frequents, and he frequented last year. So I put out some Whitetail Mash, shameless plug to them, and it kind of tends to draw deer in because it's kind of a treat for them. It's something they don't get typically, especially where I'm at. And I set up a plan on October the 9th or the 10th. I put the mash out, and I've got a tree stand that stays in that position year round, and it's a lock on. And I said I've got 2 days in that particular week to hunt, so I told myself I'll put the feed out. I'll give it 2 days. I had to go out of state with the family, and when I get back, I wanted to hunt the stand twice. So on October the 12th, I go in blind. I know nothing about as far as inventory of deer this year. I've not had any cameras out there. I've been focusing on my lease most of the year. All I knew was the big deer that I had last year was in the area, in the general area. So I went in there early, October 12th. It was about, when I went in, probably in the neighborhood of 70 degrees. I got set down around 4 o'clock. It was a beautiful day. It was sunny, very low wind. I'm about 20 feet the tree, and the tree that I'm in the ground actually slopes down about 10 feet from the same elevation as the deer are on, meaning the deer are actually standing at about, if I'm sitting in the lock on, the deer are probably just below my feet. So I'm almost eye level with them, but a little higher.
Yeah.
So, and my feed site, my food plot is about probably 19 yards from my lock on. So it's a really good setup. It's an ethical setup, etc. But I'm on a ridge top here. And, I'm filming the whole thing, and it's super calm in the woods, but still electric. It's not like lully, as we like to say this time of year. It's not October lull, but it's not like, you could tell something could happen at any time. And I'm just sitting there. I got set down at 4, like I said. And I just had a feeling the whole day. It was just different. I'm always a fan of first sits, but nonetheless, I enjoyed being in the woods, and I could tell that day something was going to go down. I just didn't know what. So, but, I filmed all the surroundings, and everything felt good. And it was about 7 on the dot. I look over to my right, and basically for all you mountain listeners out there, behind me is a deep hollow, or holler, as we like to call it, dead behind me, and it goes all the way to my right side, and it comes up to me. So, like I said, I'm hunting the top third just by this ridge. So, to the right of me, about 7 o'clock, coming up out of that deep hollow, I see a white rack about 50 yards to my right. And it's clearly a good buck, I can tell. So, I pull up the binos, and I get him in range on my camera and everything, and I'm following him, and it's a pretty good 8-pointer. I mean, he's probably 16 inches wide or better.
Good deer.
Pretty tall, big body. I mean, he's probably a 3-year-old, but he's a really good-looking deer, and I've got a bow in my hand, so I'm just chomping at the bit. Let's go, let's do this. And I filmed this deer for probably 8 to 10, 11 minutes. He's just easing down. He's looking around. He's being methodical, as they say. He gets to the top
very
of the...
relaxed.
He was. He even tried to wind me a few times and could get nothing, and my wind was blowing in his face. That's a plug to Scent Thief, by the way. And he goes around this big tree, and he disappears for just a second, and he comes up downwind of the food, as they always do up there. And he stands there for a minute, and funnily enough, and you'll see this in the footage if you watch the video, but we have some law enforcement and some fire and rescue go by. We're kind of close to a main highway where I'm at, and the sirens are going crazy, and every coyote in the woods starts sounding off with these sirens. It was kind of cool and kind of creepy at the same time, but nonetheless, it happens, and the deer just stands there and lets it go down and don't move and just stays cool and calm and collected. And he finally, about 12 minutes into filming this deer, he finally comes over right in front of me in my shooting lane, and he starts to feed. I grab my bow at this time, and I'm just waiting, trying to get a good shot. And basically, after I look back at the footage, this deer, he never moves his body at all from the time he comes in and starts feeding. And basically, from the time he's there, he feeds for about 2.5 minutes, and he's quartering away to me the whole time. His head's to my left, and he's quartering away the entire time. But he's so big body, at the bottom of his belly, the top of his back it's big as a beach ball, at 19 yards. So I felt good about it. I pulled my bow back and pulled off what I thought was a great shot. Big whack, big sound. He runs off. Good to go. I'm pumped. Let me preface this by saying I also shot a bobcat an hour before I seen this deer. So there was that. I shot the bobcat at like 6 o'clock, but nonetheless, that was a 13-yard shot, as you'll see on the video also. But anyway, back to the deer. So he horse kicked pretty good after I shot him, and the shot felt great. I was confident. I let the deer run off. I pulled up the footage really quick and saw it was a nice, lung area shot. Up and down was good, maybe a slightly high, but everything looked good. We give him about 30, 45 minutes to expire. I called my dad and my father-in-law, and they came to me. And we started at the food plot there and followed his blood trail. You know, at this point, it's about 8 o'clock at night when we're starting to look. You know, it's dark, and we've all got our lights up there, and we've got a little bit of blood at the mash. We follow it on out to this thicket around the top third of this mountain, and it starts to get much heavier. You know, and every couple of feet, we're talking literally every 3 or 4 feet, there's good blood. And like I said, I shot this deer on top of a ridge in the mountains, in the eastern Kentucky mountains. So basically, this deer had ran down a gorge, essentially is what it's the best way to describe it. It's a thicket covered gorge. We're talking from where I'm at the top to the bottom of this gorge, you're literally talking about 500 yards, 400 anyway, down. And it's full of the thickest, terrible, whatever you can come up with.
Briars.
Of all.
Yeah.
Yes. There's hardly any benches on the way down. It's just all the way down.
If it's wet, you just slid all the way down.
Oh, yeah. And we tracked this deer basically to about the last 10%, meaning we went about 450, 480 down, and we stopped because, you know, my dad and father-in-law are older, and it just got brutal. So we had good blood for 400 or 500 yards, big, bright, shiny lung blood. It was evident this deer was pretty much bleeding out. It was just a matter of time. So we backed out, and we went give it overnight, and went back the next day to the previously saw blood. We made a pin for the last place we saw it, and once we picked up that next morning, we went back to that previous location, and I just started looking. We looked all around the hillside, all the way to the bottom of the neighboring property where he went down, which is the bottom of that gorge. And we've tracked him over actually to where he was actually making a circle, it seemed, going back where he came from, which where we thought the deer might be bedding. So once we got to that point, his next turn, shockingly, was straight up. I mean, we're talking like a straight up bluff. Basically, it's the next gorge on the other side that leads right up back to where he was probably bedding, which is about 80 yards roughly from my tree. And it got to a point where we just physically couldn't do it anymore. And we thought, you know, he's going back where he came from. Clearly, we had everything pinned on HuntWise. And I just decided I'm going to give this a couple of days. We physically cannot go after this deer any longer. Just the way the land's laying, we give it our best shot. So I'll just wait. I'll look for buzzards. I'll go out and drive around and smell. We'll find him. And that's exactly what I've done. It's been about 8 days now, and I've looked for buzzards every day. I've been in there on foot, walking through all the bedding areas where I think he might have been, every little corridor that I thought he might go to, and nothing. I mean, it sucks. Every bow hunter, if you do a lot of bow hunting, this is going to happen. It's terrible. But and looking back at the footage, and you guys can look at the still image there, what's probably happened is the shot was quartering away, and it was ever so slightly high. I mean, ever so slightly. So we've probably punctured the left lung and gotten into the back shoulder on the opposite side, like the deer's right shoulder. And it's probably just, you know, he's just dead somewhere in that thick stuff. And I think the deer's dead. He has not showed up on camera with the small 8 that he was running with, and I'm getting the other 8 every day. So the deer is probably expired somewhere, but we've just not been able to recover him so far. It sucks. It really does.
I'm watching that footage as we speak.
Yeah.
Man, that deer is dead.
I think the deer's dead. I don't see how a deer could live with one lung. But I think the loud smack is definitely me getting into that shoulder.
On the opposite side.
On the opposite side. You know, that was another thing I wanted to preface here, guys. Most of my life, nearly every deer that I have killed with a bow, and that's been about 15, best I can remember, almost all of them were pass-throughs. This one did not. And honestly, even with the footage considered, I should have backed out. If from now on, if I don't get a pass-through, if that arrow is not laying there, I am not going after that deer. I don't care what. I'm going to give him time because, in my opinion, my dad's opinion as well, about 80 yards from where I shot him, we had the most blood in this one area. We're talking like the size was about a little bit smaller than a basketball. And our opinion was he probably bedded down there after I shot him and was bleeding out. And once we started the trail on him, we bumped him. and that deer has went God knows how far.
Dude, they can go so far on one lung.
Yeah,
It's unrealistic, honestly, but they can.
yep, yep. And
And I
man,
would venture to say you're correct. I think that's exactly what happened.
and I think if we'd have just backed out of there and got out and give him overnight, he'd have probably been laying right there, and I
Yeah.
ain't got him. So it sucks. I hate losing an animal. I'm all about let's do it right. Let's shoot it correctly. Let's have an ethical shot. Everything. Give the deer its dignity. All that. But unfortunately, hopefully he died that night, overnight, and I've just not found him. And hopefully he'll be drugged where I see him or I'll smell him or somebody will call or something. But for any fellow neighbors out there, if you see a good, nice, tall, white racked 16, 17-inch white 8-point, call me.
Well, going back to you doing everything ethically, I agree with that. You know, that's the main reason you didn't kill Mr. Consistent a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
It's because you said you wanted to make an ethical shot, and he didn't present a perfectly ethical shot.
Yep.
So,
But it's like there's a balance there, man. It's like when you're shooting mature deer, it's like you've got just a window most of the time, right?
yep,
It's just a small window, but you've got to capitalize when you are given anything
yep.
with them. You can't wait around. You can't say, well, this scenario's got to be perfect, but you also have to be ethical at the same time.
And we're running cameras. You have to think about where's that happy medium between getting this deer on film and getting this deer on the ground.
Correct.
Like, you know, bow hunting and then filming, especially if you're self-filming, it's just, my gosh, man, it's the most wonderful thing that I hate.
Right.
Like, I don't know how to explain it.
Exactly.
Like, it's so much weight in my pack.
Yep.
It just, we've talked about this so many times, but getting these animals on footage and on film,
It's amazing.
it's amazing.
Yeah, man.
But how do you find that happy medium to where you just want to say, all right, man, we've been beat by him a couple times. You need to shoot him as soon as you see him.
I know.
And then you're sacrificing footage. And that's kind of
I
what
know.
happened to us on the lease is I wanted a little more film of him.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, and I'm trying to get the job done. But,
yeah,
you know, it's like that's why we're doing this. We're doing this to share it with people.
yeah,
And like you said, it's a battle trying to find the balance between my killer instincts and getting good footage, right? But that's what makes this fun. This is like golf. You can't master this stuff. We're doing our best to bring the best content that we can, and then also being the most ethical that we can.
If it was easy, it wouldn't be fun.
That's right. If we could just go out there and it'd be like a Disney movie every time, nobody
Yeah.
would do it. So, but man, that's the unfortunate part of bow hunting is, and it also why it drives us to bow hunt, because it's not easy, guys. Getting a mature whitetail, or any whitetail for that matter, and that kind of proximity to you, and being able to pull off drawing your bow back and taking a shot at that deer is a tall order. It's a tall order, okay?
The tallest
Yeah,
order.
man.
Yeah.
I mean, you're right in their wellhouse, right in their living room. I mean, and it's the most breathtaking thing ever, and that's why we do it. But bow and arrow is a funny thing, and shot placement is an even funnier thing. And I've learned a valuable lesson. So, if you want my advice, everybody, if you don't get a pass through, back out. I know you're excited. I'm as excited as they come. Back out, give that deer time, and then go back the next day. He'll probably be less than half of the distance that he would have been otherwise.
It's always a good idea to back out.
Even
just-
if you do get a pass through.
The only reason you wouldn't is to preserve the meat and to beat the coats to him. But
Yeah.
if you know you've got a pass through, you've double lunged him, you've got a heart shot,
That's different.
That's different.
And I say even then, give him 45 minutes.
But if you feel like you've made any bit, not even marginal, but less than perfect, it's not necessarily a bad idea to just give him time.
Yep, I agree. And I'm the world's worst for it. And I will
We all are.
and I will take this and I will learn from it big time.
But hey, with that said, that deer was dead.
Yeah.
When I
do
seen that footage, I was like, man, I cannot wait to see the real deal because
Yeah.
I knew he was dead.
Yeah, man.
Like it just.
And I know he's dead because it's been, I think, 9 days now, and he's not on camera.
And it's so sad.
Yeah, he's not with the deer. He's always with. That deer I'm getting every day. He's dead. It just sucks that he's laying out there in fairly close proximity and I can't find him.
You left out a very important part of this story.
Okay.
You got a dog.
Yes, I did. Shout out to Hank, Hank Smith. He's a local, somewhat legend, and I actually the second day I went and borrowed him from his mom Leanne, and she let me borrow him and take him, and man, it was just, dogs tend to go off dander and etc. And it might have been a little bit late, but I like I said, I give this deer my best shot. I went and got 2 guys to help me look. I give it 2 days. I got a dog. I done everything I could to recover this deer.
I want people to understand just how difficult mountain recovery is.
It is insane.
I don't know even how to describe it. And we talk about this Appalachian Mountain so much, and we're going to continue to talk about it because it's where our heart is.
Yep.
It's where we're born. It's where we're raised. But man, you can't detail and have people understand how high and steep and thick, and where these deer, like, there has been multiple times, and I mean multiple, that I have walked straight over turkey. I've walked straight over deer, and whoever was with him, he's like, man, right here's your deer, and you just didn't see him.
Yeah, it's like I've probably walked by him 2 or 3 times.
Yeah,
in that trail. I have, and I can't see him.
Yeah.
And there's so many down trees. It's so thick. There's just no way. It's like a needle in a needle stack.
Dude, the buck that I killed last year, he fell down to our feet, and we didn't even see him.
Yeah, it's insane.
He was butted up against a down tree.
Right.
A big
that
down
looks
tree.
like him, and you couldn't even see him right in front of your face.
Dude, we walked within 5 to 8 yards at best, and we were looking, and it was just like, you look down, and there he is.
Yeah, that's
like,
my point.
They blend in.
That deer was maybe 80 yards from us when we shot him.
Yeah.
And he ran down maybe 30 or 40 and crashed, and we saw him crash, and we still had a hard time recovering him, and he's right in front of our face. So imagine what kind of undertaking it would be for me to go into a 500-yard gorge in a thicket and try to find this deer. I mean, it's insane. And I give it my best shot.
Yeah.
I did find out later that a friend of mine, well, not a friend of mine, more of an acquaintance, that lives in my hometown, actually has a thermal drone, and I had no idea. And that goes off, obviously, heat.
Yeah.
And if I'd have called him, we could have, while he was still warm, I could have found him.
Yeah.
But I'll know now. Speaking of drones and thermal drones, whatever the guy's name is on YouTube, he's called something.
Drone deer recovery.
Drone deer. I thought about calling him, but I didn't. So
yeah,
there's only one and one only singular thing that was good that comes out of this lack of recovery, and that is this. I have a buck tag still. So
yeah,
that is it. Otherwise, my deer lives on with the footage and the images I got of him. And hopefully I recover him. I sincerely hope someone out there hears this and calls me and says, "Hey, coyotes drug this thing down here. I think it's your deer."
Yeah. Or we can go back, after all the leaves have fallen in January when deer season's over. Yeah.
And find his skull or something.
Yeah.
We'll do that. We
can try something, man. I don't want to give up on that deer.
No.
He's a really good deer. He's a 120-inch deer all day long.
He's around 120 and at least 3.5 years old, I would say, at least, and would be my biggest bow kill to date.
Yeah.
So, maybe even biggest, period.
I just want to say that I was the last one to know about this deer. I'm still kind of in my feelings about that.
And the reason why we've been targeting this really mature 8-pointer on my lease, that kind of leads me into my next bit here, but we got a really old bully, big-bodied, I'm going to say, literally, I think this deer's 5+. He's that old based on his face and all the pictures I have anyway. And we had a plan to hunt that deer the following day on a Monday. So when I shot this deer that I'm talking about here with my bow, which was on a Sunday, I was real reluctant to tell Ricky here because I was getting ready to burn my tag on a home deer. But anyway, he would have been happy if I'd have recovered it.
Absolutely, man. Biggest fan.
Yep.
Yeah.
But we have another hunt at my lease scheduled for the end of this week, which will be either October the 24th or 25th, one of those 2 days, and we're going after that deer once again. He's been patterning like crazy in the same food area, and it's not been as consistent as it has been the whole month of September and the first half of October. However, he is coming in there probably every 3 or 4 days.
Hence his name,
Mr. Consistent, yes. And
which is unreal.
It's unbelievable. This deer has been coming to the same food plot. Literally, at one time, we had him in there 14 or 15 days in a row at the same time, plus or minus 5 minutes. I mean, it's
With that, though, we have to also say that you and your dad found his bed.
We did.
His bed.
We found it, yes.
Which is what, 60, 80 yards from where we're hunting? And he's getting up from his bed and walking
right to us
and
on
going,
this field
and
edge.
I would venture to say he's going and laying right back down.
Probably. Yep. He's kind of going out on the town. You know, he's checking the field and he's going right back.
Yep.
Yep. And literally, one of his beds that we found from our hunting site, we're hunting a thicket on the ground, mind you, with a bow in this food plot. But it's our best case because there's no trees for us to get in. So we're hunting him on the ground in a thicket with camera gear, the whole deal. And he's bedding literally in one bed is probably about 45 yards.
Oh, we have to be super quiet.
Yeah, it's but
Getting set up.
But the property lays out perfectly for entry, thankfully. Mm-hmm. That's what we got going for us. But it's like the later in the year we get to this, you know, this is our pursuit of this animal, and every hunt, there's fewer and fewer leaves in that thicket.
Yeah.
And when we go back this week, there's going to be even fewer.
Yeah.
Meaning, that's why we have to take him so quickly. Because as soon as he comes out, you better be drawing on him.
With that said, he had no idea we was in the world.
No idea.
Our last hunt. No, that was our 2 hunts ago. Our last hunt, he did not show up.
Correct.
So
he's a lot of things, and easy to kill has not been one of them, although he's been very consistent on his daylight movement, which is rare. And this deer is a mature deer. He's not a massive rack deer, but he's not small by any means. He's got good mass. He's got a big old body. I know this deer weighs 200 pounds. I mean, he's
or
huge.
more.
He's huge. He is a trophy deer, especially with a bow. I look forward to hopefully getting a shot on him, and we're going to do our best to get it all on film from the ground with a bow. It'll be amazing if we can pull this off.
It's a straight up ambush.
It is. It's old school, and I love it. It's great.
Yeah.
So now we're going to kind of get into a little more of the nitty gritty and nuts and bolts of hunting here. I want to let Ricky kind of give you his idea of, you know, where we're at in the hunting season, what you should be looking for, and things of that nature going into the rut.
Well, today is what? October 22nd. So
Yes.
we're getting right.
Oh, yes.
We're getting into that part of the year that we wait for all year. You know,
Count down the days.
I live between turkey season and deer season. And I'm thinking about deer season during turkey season. I'm thinking about turkey season. Like I'm
April, September.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So
But October is like magical.
Yes.
Right? And we're there. We're here.
You know, and just to kind of talk about that, you know, I feel like a lot, you know, deer, if you've got a decent buck that you're after, he's his most, yours is
Rare.
Yeah. Like that's awesome.
Yeah.
But deer are the most patternable in early season.
Yes. Coming off that summer
Yes.
thing.
Yeah.
Right.
If you can find their travel patterns in relation to their bed and their food, the ball is in your court. Still not easy.
Yeah, of course.
You have to have good access,
Yep.
which I do not have.
Yeah.
But in any sense, we live for November.
Oh, yeah.
So
That's the Taj Mahal of this.
and I preface that to say early season for me is warm-ups.
Yeah.
That's scrimmages.
Yeah.
To say.
Yeah. Exhibitions.
That's getting back to you know, our saddle equipment. You know, when I got back in the saddle for the first time this year, I went out about 3 or 4 weeks before season, and I got set up in the tree, and man, I just felt like I was filming all over myself.
Yeah.
And it was like there's so many moving parts to it that you have to reintegrate yourself and get your flow. So I feel like I spend all of September getting that flow. Now I feel good.
Yeah.
I feel great.
It's kind of evened out.
Yeah.
You know, the ride's not bumpy anymore.
Yeah.
We're just kind of,
Yeah.
we're in idle. We're waiting on the right time and the right,
Yeah.
you know, cold snap. Or,
Well, and
or
furthermore,
whatever.
it's scratching the itch.
Yeah,
you
man.
know.
Yeah.
So with that said, we are rapidly approaching the pre-rut for Eastern Kentucky.
Yep.
You know,
We're right there.
a
We're
lot
so
of these
close.
a lot of other states north of us are already there.
Yep. And the South boys are kind of almost there. They're a little bit out.
Yeah.
Right.
But for Eastern Kentucky, we're approaching those dates, and the pre-rut for us usually falls around about Halloween.
Yeah. 27th to 31st, roughly,
Yeah.
of October.
The latter part of October into November.
Which is,
Yeah.
man, your best, in theory, your best bow hunting all year.
Yes.
For bucks, for
Yeah.
big deer. I don't mean just in general. I mean for
I'm
bucks.
always more excited for the pre-rut than I am for gun season.
Yeah,
I
man.
always feel better. Our gun season usually falls around, I think this year's like November 9th.
It's 9th. Yep.
Yeah.
It's usually right around between the November 7th to the November 9th, roughly, where it starts first week.
So that week leading up to it that's the heart of our pre-rut.
Best bow hunting of the year.
Yeah. That's when these bucks start doing things that they hadn't been doing.
And in theory, wouldn't that be the time of year where non-resident bucks start to move in? Ish.
Ish.
Right?
Ish. Yeah.
Give or take. 'Cause you're already experiencing that.
I would say ish.
Yeah.
More so as you start getting into peak, I feel like your peak rut.
Yeah.
You know, you got
But stragglers. There might be some curious
there's-
stragglers, you know.
100%.
And it's exciting.
So that's kind of the date range for us. And the pre-rut will usually go to around 8 or 9 days following Halloween. So signs of the pre-rut are just an explosion of buck sign.
Yes.
When you walk in the woods and you start seeing torn up trees and you start looking at any kind of limbs overhanging any kind of trail, and it looks like you've just been in there stomping your feet on it and clearing everything out, like
Right.
you know it's getting right.
I.e. scrapes are everywhere.
Yes.
You know, field edges, logging roads, they're
Yeah.
there.
You can't walk under a licking limb that ain't been torn up.
Exactly.
So when you see that, you know it's time. You need to be in the woods. And, you know, a lot of my advice that I give and what I talk about is advice that I've taken, whether that be from people or whether it be from articles that I've read and that I put faith in.
And just stuff you've learned in the woods.
Yeah, and
yourself.
and obviously the things you've learned in the woods. So one thing that I will say during the pre-rut, now this doesn't go for during the peak, you know,
Yep.
because all bucks will be making sign.
Sure.
But during the pre-rut, that's usually your bigger deer, your more mature deer.
Yep.
If you're seeing that sign,
Dominant
yes.
bucks.
If you're
so to
seeing
speak.
sign in the woods in that week following
It's the
Halloween,
bigger deer.
Yes.
It's not so much the younger bucks. I heard someone else talking about that this week. It's like, man, every time we see a rub or whatever, we'd always just say, well, it could be that forky over there. Well, it's really not. At this time of year, the dominant deer are predominantly making all the sign.
Yes, and I also want to. That's a good point, and I don't want to get too off topic, but that is something that I feel like is a old myth, wives' tale.
What's that?
Guys like to judge a rub off of its size,
And you can't.
you cannot do that.
I agree.
The only way that I can even remotely think of a bigger buck made that rub versus a smaller buck making that rub is the height of the rub.
Yeah, like how tall the deer is.
If you've got a you know, big bucks and small bucks will hit saplings.
Little bitty tiny.
little
like we're
tiny
talking
trees.
the
Yeah.
diameter here of a dime.
Yeah.
You know, they'll both do that.
They'll both do that.
But the big ones, you can pretty much bank on was a big deer, not a little one. That's
Well,
kind of the only distinction
yeah,
you can.
The biggest distinction for me, even those little, what I call saplings,
Yep.
that's little saplings,
Yep.
those, even the bigger bucks have to get a little lower on because they bend so easily.
Right. That
So-
makes sense.
But your bigger trees, it's got some diameter, maybe forearm.
Yeah,
You
like
know,
a baseball diameter.
The higher that is, you know that a bigger buck has made that. And another sign.
And if it's deeper. rubbed.
Yes, and another sign is if there's any garbage around it.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got other trees around it, or maybe you got a split limb tree. If you're seeing time marks
Yeah.
up in there,
Yeah.
well, I mean that's a no-brainer.
Yep.
So you can't always judge a rub off of that's. You can't
rack
judge a book
size.
by the cover.
That's right.
Perfect. That's a perfect way to
Yep.
put it.
Yep, I agree.
So,
That's good stuff.
Yeah.
But as far as leading into the rut, say a deer hunter's listening to this and he's like, hey, okay, I kind of get a feel for what I need to do with my bow through, October, say 27th to November the 8th. In your opinion, what do you think is a good approach when you get the rifle in your hand and it's, say, opening weekend of the rut? What are you thinking? What's your mindset on it?
Well, before I talk about that, we want to talk about that lockdown phase.
Yes, that's a big thing.
Because this year, opening weekend of gun season should be slow.
More than likely.
I mean, there's always the fluke thing that
Yeah.
I mean, it's the time of year. It don't matter when it is.
Sure.
You have a good likelihood. I don't want to say a high likelihood, but you have a really good chance of seeing deer in the woods if you're there.
Yep, just sit down. If you got to be there. They're wild animals. Anything can happen.
So,
But
when bucks find that first doe during the pre-rut, that's an easy hit for them.
yep,
Okay. As the rut goes on, all these does start coming in estrus, and you experience what's called the lockdown. And that's where bucks are locked down with does and breeding. And that usually happens for about 3 or 4 days.
and what he means by that, for anybody out there listening, typically that very first lockdown phase, what he's talking about is if you're in the woods opening weekend the first few days and you're seeing a ton of bucks, but none of them are kind of like over 120. Well, that's why. The first does that come into estrus, the dominant deer are going to get them.
Yeah.
They're going to be first.
Yeah.
And what that does is when the first dominant buck gets that hot doe or does, however many there are, depending on the size of place you're at, they're locked down with them. And that means these other smaller bucks, these 2.5 to 4.5 year olds or whatever, the smaller deer that are not dominant are running wild.
Yeah.
And if that's what you're after, well, you're all set, bro.
Yeah.
You're going to have your pick. So,
But shortly after that, and we'll walk into it, but shortly after that, those bucks are going to start breaking away from those does that they've bred, and they're on the hunt.
i.e., that could be the 4th day in, that could be the 2nd week. Right?
That's why it's so important during the rut to just be in the woods.
That's right. You got to be in there, guys. You can't kill them from the couch.
Yeah.
But,
So, but getting back to your question was, what does it look like from October 27th to November 9th?
Yep.
I would put my weight in the mornings.
For the first time of the season, we're
we're
focusing on mornings.
We're still not into that time frame of you want to hunt all day. I would hunt. I mean, this is pretty obvious, I guess, for us because we hear it and read it and experience it so much. But
Yep.
it goes to say that you've got to put your weight between your food source and bedding areas of your does.
Hunt the does.
Hunt the does.
Agreed.
Yes.
Yep. This time of year.
If you know where they're bedding, if you've got a good pattern on does, if you're hunting remotely close to them based on your wind, and you have to be so cautious about your wind during this time because bucks are scent checking.
Correct.
They are running with their nose on the ground and in
true.
the air.
That's true. All the time. More than
So
ever.
You have to really be cautious of your scent,
That makes perfect sense.
of your wind direction. Now, with that said, bucks also get a little dumb.
Yep.
And
They'll tolerate it
Yeah.
to an extent.
during that time of the year.
Yep.
But if you can find, if you've got a decent pattern on your does, for instance, like I've got a couple food sources where I feed, and those does are so consistent. It's like
Clockwork.
7:30 to 8:30 in the morning, they're there.
Yep.
And what that attributes to, I guess, is those bucks are going to come to that location looking for their does, looking for that first doe that's going to come into estrus. So it's so important to just be in the woods and know where your doe bedding groups are, know where they're feeding, know the trails going to your beds, to your food source. And that goes back to your access. That's so important. And my access is terrible. It's terrible.
You just got to kind of play the hand you're dealt and try
Yeah,
to.
I have to play the hand I'm dealt. Yeah.
Now that's all with a bow in her hand.
Yeah.
So what are you thinking? Does your approach change once you do go rifle hunting? Once the rut, once
Obviously.
gun season hits, what are you thinking?
obviously when gun season hits, a whole new realm opens because you're
Yes.
not a 30-yard
Yeah,
archer at that point.
Right.
You know,
Right.
you've got a gun in your hand,
And I think scent matters, just not near as much.
well,
Right? It does matter.
it
It never
does
doesn't
matter.
matter.
Yeah, it does matter. But I feel like bucks, especially as you get further into the rut,
Yep.
they're exhausted, they're worn out, they're not going to just pay no mind to the wind. I mean, that don't happen, but they're going to be less likely to bust you, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But they're just tired and worn out from running, and they're just looking for their next doe. And that's the, you know, I've witnessed it. Bucks acting stupid.
Oh, yeah.
Like
Oh,
ridiculous. And
yeah.
like, what are you doing?
Like I would describe it, it was not last year, but the year before when I was at an outfitter. I was hunting in western part of the state in Kentucky, and it was 80 degrees before we went out there, and it was 32 the opening morning, and they were literally what I would describe. They were running around like dogs.
With their tongues hanging out.
With their tongues hanging out.
Yeah.
Just poking their noses and running and looking like a dog. Like,
Yeah.
so wild to see and witness.
Now, with that said, that brings up another important point. But if you have a water source during this time of the year, those bucks have to come to that.
I was thinking about a water source today. You realize there's a small water hole on that lease we've been hunting.
Yeah.
That we should consider.
Yeah.
More than I have.
Yeah.
I don't know what time of day, but we should.
Yeah, and you want to find if you have multiple, like down there's multiple water sources.
Yeah.
But the more secluded ones.
Which this one is.
Yeah.
It's right off the food plot field.
Oh, my gosh. And if you've got doe bedding around there, it's like killing two birds with one stone. He's able to go scent check the does. He's able to get him a drink because he's exhausted. But if you've got a water hole close, if you're, like I said, especially if you've got doe bedding, like if you can make that your setup, that's wonderful because these bucks, they're running so hard and they're exerting so much energy that they have to refuel.
And I was going to tell you, basically, that field, food plot, he's bedded, doe bedding, water hole. Okay?
Yeah.
You realize that in less than probably 2 acres, he has everything he needs, and that is why he's chosen to bed there.
Yeah.
It's genius.
That's
That's why he's there. He's by the water, he's by the doe bedding, and he's by the food.
Yeah.
All.
Now, don't your dad have a water source back there by his stand now?
Well, it's dry.
It's dried up. Okay.
Normally, yes, and that could affect it this year. That could be why we're not seeing those deer. It's dried up down there.
Yeah.
But, yeah, that's why that old guy's hanging out up there.
Yeah.
By the way.
Makes perfect sense.
Yes.
And it's funny the things, when we start talking about things, it just pops in your head.
Yeah,
it's like you
oh my
know these
gosh.
things, but you don't think about it until you start talking about it.
Yes.
But, so yeah, that's, with a gun, I think we got off track again. But with a gun in your hand, you know, your realm of possibilities has just opened up so much more.
It's endless, man.
Yeah, like, you got a good optic on top of your rifle, and you got a good round to put a deer down with. Like, it's, I hate to say it this way.
Yeah.
But I attribute it to if you can see it, you can kill it.
You can. Look, if you know your gun, if you put your work in, if you can shoot well, you know your gun well, which I'm getting a brand new one this year that I'm really excited about. For me, buying a 308, but I can't wait.
Tika?
Yep. Probably going to go Tika. I've always shot a Tika, and I'm going to get a 308 this year because I watched him, Ricky here, kill that 150-inch 8 with his 308, and I'm pretty pumped to get on that bandwagon.
Yeah.
So,
Shot placement, but
yeah.
I love my 308.
Yeah, but I feel like the bigger the caliber, the more you can get away with.
It's a hammer, man.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. So, and I say that very lightly with the if you can shoot, you can see it. I hate for people to get the wrong idea because here's what you're going to experience during the rut. And I've shot deer. That deer right there all the way to the right, that European mount.
Oh, yeah.
All the way to the main right that I killed where I told you we was talking about this a while ago before we started the show. I killed that deer on the run chasing a doe. I heard the doe coming. I was sitting in a summit climber. This was in 2013.
Field edge?
No, I was sitting in a low gap on a ridge.
Got you.
It was one of my favorites when I used a self climber. But now that I've gotten a saddle, man, I love to bounce around.
Yep.
But I was hunting a low gap with that deer, and I heard crashing in the leaves from probably 200 yards out.
when you first saw it.
When I first saw her.
Okay.
Yep. And I knew at that point, we can be fooled by squirrels all morning long,
Oh my
all
gosh,
day long.
all day.
But when you hear a deer, you know it's a deer.
You do. There's no debate.
I don't know how to explain.
It's hard to explain. It is, but anyway.
But there was no mistake in this, and it was running. It was crashing through the leaves, and this was
in timber.
This
obviously.
was opening weekend of gun season. It was like 20-some degrees that morning, and I heard her coming. I didn't know what it was. I just heard a bunch of running. So I stood up. I grabbed my gun. I saw the doe from about 150 yards out. I finally got visual of them. This is a big, long, low gap. And that buck was right on her tail. I'm talking like 15 yards behind her.
Okay.
And she was running as hard as she could from him, and he was running just as hard as her to get up to her.
Ow.
And I tried to holler at him when he was about 50, 60 yards out. I screamed at him. He would not stop, so I took a running shot and dropped him.
You're kidding.
I
didn't know that story.
Probably never do it again.
Wow.
But I took a running shot on that deer and dropped him.
Wow.
And so that's what I'm saying. Gun hunting's still that's not your ticket.
Yeah.
But if
man,
you've got a deer standing and he's presenting you a shot opportunity, it's your fault if you don't kill him.
Yeah, well,
that's my opinion.
Because if you can go out and you can shoot at all, come on, guys, we're shooting a whitetail here. It's a pretty big target.
Now, I also preface that by saying, this goes back to you. You need a steady rest.
You do. That's why this is the steady rest issue. Is why I missed the biggest deer. Well, one of the biggest deer I ever shot last year and didn't recover him because I had to pull off the whim shot because I didn't take my shooting stick.
Oh.
I'm a big proponent of shooting sticks or blinds that have a res, whatever. But I had to do it freehand and in about 2 seconds, and that's why I didn't get him.
Well, a lot of guys are still using climbers.
Yeah,
especially the old Summits or the Summit Vipers, man. Those have the shooting rail all the way around it. So
will you saddle hunt with a rifle? That's my next question.
Yes, I will.
You will. That's very in vogue and current. So, I'm trying to wrap my mind around. I guess you'll just lean against a tree and find a branch, maybe, or
no.
What
you
are
don't.
thinking?
You don't even need that, man.
Okay.
So, I saddle hunted all last year. So I got the tethered lockdown, now called the tethered ultra lock, and that thing is like a Cadillac, man. But last gun season, man, I hunted several days in a row from daylight to dark, time spent in that saddle.
I remember.
And, it's not as difficult as you might think. You can always just especially if it's your strong side in a saddle, you're facing the tree. You can kind of prop your gun up, and sometimes you can use your hook that you hang your gun on, your bow hanger, your gun hanger. You can prop it up on it if it's low enough.
Okay.
If not, what I do, and I don't know how to describe this on a show where listeners will be able to understand, but you kind of put your thumb against the tree like this.
At a right angle.
And you just lay your barrel kind of in your hand, and it kind of gives you a steady shot.
Okay,
there.
yeah. Yeah, what he's saying there, guys, like if you're looking at the tree itself, you put your left hand, if you're a right-handed shot, if you hold your fingers up and your thumb out,
it's almost like holding a stop sign.
You're making a right angle there. And if you put your hand around the tree, you can get your barrel above your thumb and let it sit there. And it's kind of an anchor point for you to rest with.
Yeah.
If you're in a saddle or lock on.
So that's a good steady shot for that. The only time you'll run into a problem with not having, where you kind of have to freehand it, you're just shooting,
which is exactly what I did.
Yeah, is if they get behind you, because then you got to spin around and you're just. But there's still a solution to that.
Yeah, and I think freehanding, guys, it can be done.
I
think it's with 100 yards or in, you can do it. The problem is, guys, and I wanted to reiterate this when I just thought about it during the rut more than ever. A shooter buck is simply rarely still.
Yeah.
You're rarely.
They're not just moseying.
No, they're not out there just leisurely eating most of the time.
Yeah.
They're just not.
They're on a mission.
They're on the move. A buck is always going from point A to point B with a purpose. They do not walk around and meander like a doe does. And more than ever through the rut, they're just moving. So you got to be able to stop them or shoot them on the walk, one. So it's best to have a rest or some kind of anchor point in prep.
Well, I want to also mention that I was talking about, there's a way around that. You can take, and it's another thing, it'd be easier to show in person than it would on the show. But it don't matter if you're in a saddle, it don't matter where you're at, but if you're having to freehand a shot, you're going to shoulder your rifle as normal.
Yep.
You're going to put your arm through your sling that you sling over your shoulder.
Okay.
And you're going to wrap it back around and hold your gun like that, and it steadies it.
And use your barrel on your arm?
Well,
is that what you're saying?
You're kind of still holding the gun as normal. You're just you're creating a leverage point. So imagine if your sling's hanging here.
Yep.
You shoulder your gun, you put your arm through the sling, and then roll it back, and then you're kind of holding the gun like this.
Because the sling is around your bottom of your elbow?
Yeah.
For stability, right?
Yeah.
I'm trying to paint this picture here for the listeners.
Yeah.
But that's a good point. That's a really good point. There's a way around it. Use your things around you guys for an anchor point. This all goes back to ethics too. I know it's a rifle. I know it's a gun, whatever, but the most solid and stable that you can be and the best shot you can make is what we're after.
Yeah.
It'll make everybody's life easier.
So getting back to the rut, we talked about you've got your lockdown. And I don't want to talk about this too much because this can be for another show.
Sure.
But you got your lockdown for around 4 or 5 days following the pre-rut, and then after that lockdown, you get back into your peak rut. And that's going to go on for about another 8 or 9 days to where it's just a frenzy. I would say your peak rut is where you're going to see chaos.
Awesome.
Yeah. So your pre-rut's just that exciting time where bucks are starting to get on their feet more. They're out cruising around looking for those first does.
Yes.
Once those bucks are in the peak rut and they know does are in, they're going crazy, just trying to find one.
Awesome.
During that lockdown phase, this happened to me last year, to where I sat for 4 or 5 days, man, and I may have seen like a scrub, if I remember, a scrub buck, little basket
That's
rat.
just so odd, isn't it?
Oh, it was
a grind.
I don't want to say terrible, but it was a grind. Yeah.
It turned what normally isn't into a grind.
Yeah.
Right. You should have been seeing deer.
I think on my 4th or 5th day,
especially where you were.
I did this for like 8 days straight. And dude, that's getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Being set up before light.
And I was hiking, you know.
Yeah, you got a big commute.
Yeah,
you know,
to get to where I'm going. And this is private land, but still.
Yeah, but still, it's an uphill commute there.
And, you know, sitting up there from daylight to dark.
With no payoff.
Yeah,
sucks.
And I remember I came home one night and I told Allison, I was like, you know what, I'm taking off tomorrow. And I was like, I know this is stupid. I know I shouldn't do that, but I'm sleeping in.
Yeah.
And I think what I did was sleep in. I think that may have been when you come up here.
That could be.
That's what happened. Because you said, I don't want to hunt that morning. I was like, well, that's perfect because I need a break.
But because I've got a 2-hour commute to get to him. So I said, you know what? I'll get up around 8. I'll get there. Let's go in around 11.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's what happened. And
I
got to sleep in, man. It rejuvenated me.
Yeah.
And what do you know? Like, boom. That next day.
We'll get into that story later. That'll be for another show.
That's a story for another show. Yeah.
That's a whole show in and of itself. Because we have the mount here now. He just received it. And it's amazing. It's as amazing today as it was then. And we may have to do a videography for that podcast. So.
We got to give a plug to Kevin Justice.
Okay.
I don't think he advertises himself. He kind of does this for the guys he knows.
And a passion, yeah. I'm sure.
But I've seen a lot of mounts that I have. And that, I'm not saying it because I'm biased, but that mount is incredible.
That mount, and it's not even my deer, that mount looks just like that deer.
Yeah.
And you can rarely say that, but it does. It looks just like he did when I seen him on that hillside. I'm like, oh, my God, that's that deer.
And Kevin's one. I've always done shoulder mounts.
Yep.
You know, Kevin talked me into this pedestal
and
mount.
It's perfect.
And I told him, I said, you know, Kevin, I want my deer to look exactly like he did when I shot him.
Which is rare, you know, and he does.
So he took and he did the pedestal mount, and that deer was broadside with his head looking to the left.
Yep.
So, and he replicated that so well, and I'm so happy with
and
that.
To me, it's hard, you know, however they do it with these mannequins, basically, but Even the facial size, the neck, it's all spot on to that deer.
Yeah.
I don't know if he took measurements or what, but
Man, the time, I've often thought about that, like the time and effort that goes
It's
into
unreal,
taxidermy. Man. You have to enjoy what you do.
yeah, it's a labor of love. That's
Yeah.
for sure.
Has to be.
It is a labor of passionate love.
But we've both said it before. If I never killed another deer, that one
is enough.
That one's enough for me.
Yeah. And I hope to God I can get there myself one day.
And he's an 8-point.
But he's a
Like
giant.
it's wild to say that about an 8-point, man, but he's just a hoss. He's an absolute stud.
That is 100% true.
And he looks good, man. I'm looking at him right now. He looks really good.
He's great. Can we copy and paste that for me this year?
Yeah.
But guys, listen, I would like to say thank you to all the listeners out there for Eastern Wild as we kick this whole thing off. This is our second podcast, many to come, and we're doing our best to get some deer on the ground. So please follow us on all of our platforms. We're going to be hunting hard all through this back half of the season, and we wish everyone out there the best of luck with their season. And definitely tune in to us next time. Eastern Wild is out.